If they only made a handheld that looked like a Sega Saturn controller. Holy crap, it's been made! Greetings, Retro Zoltan here. Up for review today is the Anbernic RG Arc D, a console that looks like a Sega Saturn controller with dual operating systems that by all means can play every Sega system. And true talk here, when handhelds start going in the direction of being Android tablets, I was a bit hesitant, but over time I could see the value. And now one of my favorite handhelds runs on Android. Anbernic made two versions of the Arc, which is the Arc S and the Arc D, which is what I have. The two are mostly the same, with the exception that the Arc S only runs on Linux operating system, while the Arc D dual boots with the option of Linux and Android 7 for your running OS, and of course a touchscreen. Also, the Arc D has a little more RAM and a little more memory also, but I don't think that makes a monumental emulation difference. Something unusual about the two is that the Arc S comes in a transparent black and a transparent blue one, but the Arc D only comes in the gray, which is kind of white to me, and a black one. Considering the form factor is exactly the same, I'm not sure why they did this, to be perfectly honest. You can tell the difference easily when you see the color of one, but you're restricted to two colors, at least for now. To have a system that now supports dual booting, to let you choose between Linux or Android, just blows my mind a little bit. Having used both, which will I choose? Will I ignore Linux now? Will I be able to use custom firmware on this thing? How do I choose which one? Is there a menu? Let's find out, shall we? I have to be honest, this is one of the coolest boxes Anbernic has put out so far. Nice, simple, and functional. I mean, they put a convenient spot for the charging cable instead of jamming it underneath with directions. Everything else in the box is per the norm. Phone protector, charging cable, directions, and a screen protector, which I always regard as a nice thing to add. The console looks impressive, and if you're a Sega enthusiast, then you will immediately be loving the look of this system that pays serious tribute to the Sega Saturn controller. My prediction last year was that Datafrog was going to come up with this design, since they once honored the Super Nintendo controller, but heavy demand for a system that looked like this got Anbernic to come out with one first, and it's obviously more powerful. To be honest, I was quite surprised. Just holding the Arc D feels amazing. I absolutely love the weight of it. It feels sturdy and perfect in my hands. Even though it's not exact, it does feel like a Sega controller. I'm having serious nostalgic vibes here. The D-pad feels incredible. I'm not super picky with D-pads, but this feels like a dream. It angles well. It tilts perfect. I'm impressed. I have no doubt this will be perfect for gameplay. And if you're into fighting games, this is your jam. I can't wait to play Streets of Rage 2. Ah yes, Streets of Rage 2. Blaze, how do you take care of so much street crime in such restrictive clothing? I have no idea. Huh? Oh, crap, sorry. I'm also a big fan of the buttons on this as well. They're located exactly where you want them and they feel very good. They took the time to display them just like on a Sega controller, so good on them for that. I'm 100% pleased. Also on the front is the start and select buttons, which I have no issues with. The speakers where I want them, and in stereo, thank you very much. The bright screen is a delightful 4.0-inch IPS OCA at 640 by 480 resolution. And as I said before, a touchscreen if you get the Arc D version. I don't believe having a touchscreen will be functional at all in Linux, but we'll see. The trigger buttons feel really good, but I feel the top ones are a bit small compared to the bottom ones. They separated them at least, and they click really nicely. You know what? Never mind. I like these a lot. Forget what I said. These are great. Also on the top with the triggers are the standard charging port, OTG port, mini HDMI out port, an F button, which I'm guessing is function, volume toggle, and power button. And on the bottom is the expected TF1 for the Linux OS and TF2 for external games, an audio jack, and if you look carefully, a reset hole if things get real crazy. And before I forget, the Anbernic RG Arc D also has a 3500 mAh battery, which will last between 5 to 6 hours. Plenty of time to get your fix. And that's it for hardware. Let's get to the software. Booting up the Anbernic Arc D for the first time will bring you right into Linux mode. I was hoping there'd be a menu or something that would let you choose, but it's slightly more complicated than that. More on that later. The Linux OS that is deemed Anbernic Linux is pretty basic. Nothing too exciting here. It works and pretty much uses RetroArch to play everything. There are a few more goodies included here, which is Mr. Boom, a free version of Bomberman, and PR Boom, which is, well, Doom. I tested it out and it plays Doom like a dream. But then again, you can get Doom to work on a pregnancy test, so I shouldn't be that impressed. There's an option called Portmaster, which got me excited, but even after connecting it to wireless, I had no luck with it. This OS feels a bit unfinished, if I'm being perfectly honest. To boot up an Android, you can navigate in the menu and turn off Linux boot on default, and then reboot. And if you want to get back to the Linux menu, boot up while pushing the F button. From here, you can change the settings again, or use the F button to decide which OS you want to be in when you boot up. I'm still getting used to the Android OS being on something not on a phone or a tablet, so I understand if it's not for you. But to keep things simple, just pull down twice and choose the RG loader to make things easier on yourself. Once you get better at this and want to explore further, you can download Android games and get more advanced and install other front ends like Show or more. The Anbernic Arc-D can play all Sega systems: Sega Game Gear, Master System, Genesis, Dreamcast, and of course, Sega Saturn. It can also play Nintendo, Super Nintendo, PC Engine, Capcom Play Systems 1 through 3, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Neo Geo, PlayStation, Nintendo 64, MAME, Neo Geo Pocket, WonderSwan, PlayStation 2, and PSP. Depending on where you buy yours from, you can easily start adding ROMs to the designated folders and add even more systems. Being that the CPU is an RK3356, PSP, Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, and Sega Saturn won't be struggling to run for a majority of the games, but you'll be pushing your luck trying to play PlayStation 2, Wii, and GameCube. So I don't really recommend adding those to your system. It will certainly make an attempt, but to me they're just completely unplayable. Control for the games feels great, until you start reaching those systems you really wish you had analog controls for them. Having only a D-pad sounds like a good idea until you start playing games that really work better with an analog stick's touch, or won't work at all without them. Still playable in some cases, but then you start aching for other controls or another system. I really enjoyed playing the Sega Genesis games with the D-pad angling perfectly, so I'm pretty happy. Keep in mind the further you adventure from the 16-bit games, the more you're really going to be questioning the decision to not have them, to not have analog sticks. That's how I feel anyway. The HDMI out port works great. I'm not disappointed by any means. And with this option, of course, you can use Bluetooth to connect a controller that has analog sticks and make this even more enjoyable. It's going to be hard to stop playing this thing enough to publish a video, I'm positive of that. If game streaming is your thing, Moonlight is included in the Android menu. I'm not the best at getting it working, but as long as you have it connected to your wireless with a PC on the network, you have another option to play even more games. Personally, I use it to play Steam games and pretend I can afford a Steam Deck. Yeah, I know, pretty pathetic. One last thing before my conclusion is something Anbernic added, which is a customization option, which I think people would enjoy. If you don't like the button mapping, the Linux version has 3 options to swap the layout to a different style. And if you're in the Android operating system, they have a Nintendo Switch layout versus a Sega layout, which I found interesting as well. Personally, I like the defaults, but there's the option there at least. Do I recommend this system? I'm kind of on the fence on this one. For me personally, I wanted to be able to play Sega games on a system that felt like a Sega controller. They certainly did that. And this isn't me digging on Anbernic because they did a great job. But to me, it feels like overkill. It's powerful enough to play games that you can't play without analog controls anyway. So why bother? I'm surprised Anbernic didn't put in analog sticks where the speakers were located to take advantage of being able to play more games, but that's just not what they were going for here. Maybe they'll add them in the future? Datafrog, if they had any sense, will come out with a $20 one that has no frills, no dual operating systems, one that will scratch that Sega itch people have been wanting to scratch for a lot cheaper. I'm not faulting Anbernic for jumping in, but the form factor doesn't match what you're playing here, unless if you're really pining to play Nintendo 64 games using a Sega controller. If it's only the form factor to play Sega games that interest you, I say hold off and wait to see if anyone else comes up with this also. But if it's a mix of Sega nostalgia and Anbernic love at the same time, then I say get your wallet out and go for it. And that's all I have to say about the Anbernic RG-D and S for that matter. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for your continued support, and as always, I'll see you next time. Bye.